One of the most common turnarounds in all of music is something called a 3-6-2-5. You can hear it here. You can hear it there. But you might not know that one of the reasons why it's so ubiquitous is because it's so much fun to play, and it's so much fun to change and substitute some of those chords. You could play it like this, or this, you could play it like this, or even like this. Now, today we're just going to be working on a specific chord in the 3-6-2-5, the 6th chord, the second chord of that progression, because there are so many great ways to sub it, which is why today we're doing 7 ways to sub on a 6. Of course, this video is brought to you by Open Studio. Go to openstudiojazz.com to sign up for an Open Studio membership. Get access to all of our courses, dozens of piano courses, and all the courses that we'll ever make as long as you're a member. You can get more information right there at openstudiojazz.com. There is a PDF for this lesson. You're going to want to download that. That's right there in the description. Now, why do we even want to sub this 6th chord at all? Why not just play the diatonic 6th chord every time? Well, when we sub, we can do really cool things like change the color, change the root movement, and change the tension of the progression. In fact, a lot of your favorite players will play a 3-6-2-5 a little bit differently every time they go around the changes, either ratcheting up the tension or making it less tense or creating some kind of chromatic movement or some kind of melodic movement that implies a different structure than the last time that they went through it. And that's because as a listener, our ears crave this sort of mix between the familiar and the unfamiliar. So great players know when to throw you a curveball when you're expecting a fastball. A 3-6-2-5 turnaround like this is the perfect place to do that because our ears are expecting a certain progression. And so knowing the different options you have, even over just one of the chords, the 6th chord in this case, can be game-changing as far as how you approach a tune. So we have 7 different ways to go about our 3-6-2-5 turnaround. The first is just the regular old meat and potatoes diatonic way. Next is the secondary dominant, then the tritone sub, the parallel minor from above, the flat 3 diminished, which is my favorite, chef's kiss, and the mu chord is number 6. And then finally, we end with the parallel minor from below, which is a super slick sound. And by the way, we're just working on, again, the 6th chord today, but these really work on any of the chords, as you'll see once we get into it. Before we get too deep into it, let's talk about what a 3-6-2-5 actually is. So in any given tonal center, we have our diatonic chords. These are chords based off of the key center of where we are. So if we're in F major, here we have chords built off the F major scale just by skipping a note. And we have the F major 7, we have the 2 chord. Notice the Roman numerals to denote the diatonic chords. The 2 chord, which is a minor 7, 3 chord, which is A minor 7, 4 chord, which is B flat major 7, the 5 chord, which is of course a C7, a 6 chord, which is the D minor, that's the relative minor, the 7th chord, which is the E minor 7 flat 5, and we're back to the 1, the F major. Now, some people will use like lowercase Roman numerals and have the 7 and everything added to it. For our purposes today, we're going to keep it super simple and plain and just use the big numbers to indicate we're in the general area of the 2, we're in the general area of the 5, because we're going to be changing the heck out of all these, and it's going to get way too complicated and visually stimulating to try to notate all of this with just the Roman numerals. We just want sort of the general area. So with all that said, we lay out these diatonic chords in the key of F, and now if we look at a 3, 6, 2, 5, that denotes a chord progression. These always usually end up in a 1, or they always vamp back and forth, right? So a 3-6-2-5 in the key of F is an A minor 7, D minor 7, G minor 7, C7, and F. You've heard it a billion times, right? That's what we're going to be talking about today, and we're going to be talking about how we can mess that up. One thing to note here is we are dealing with just the 6th chord is the chord that we're going to be substituting, which is like the 2nd chord of the chord progression we're working on, the 3-6-2-5. I am messing with all the other chords just for my own amusement in here. I'm probably not going to explain everything I'm doing on that, but just enjoy the sounds. And if you want to try to figure it out, that's all the better. Okay, number one is just the regular diatonic meat and potatoes 3, 6, 2, 5. We got our A minor 7, we got our D minor 7, a G minor 7, and a C7, right? A 3, a 6, a 2, and a 5. Now, something to note here, I'm not going to change the Roman numerals as we go through our exercises. It's always going to stay 3, 6, 2, 5, even though we're obviously not going to be playing just a diatonic 6 chord as we go. But I want you to just understand that you have the license to change that 6 chord, or any of these chords actually, to anything that you think sounds good whenever you want. That's the beauty of these turnarounds, is that they're very malleable. We can change them to fit the tension we want to do here. So let's play this little example because it's so beautiful. If you want to just take a second here and get to your piano and see if you can just hear the sound of a diatonic 3, 6, 2, 5. Check it out. So gorgeous. And of course, we can always resolve to our 1 chord. Okay, so we know about that. Those are all of the diatonic 7th chords. Those are all chords in the key of F. They're in the key, they're solid, they're grounded, very little tension. Well, what if we want to add just a little bit more tension than that? We might need to use a secondary dominant. Now notice it's still a D chord, but instead of a D minor, which would be in the key of F, it's a D7. That is a secondary dominant going to our 2 chord G minor 7. Now, what that is called tonicization, right? We're tonicizing that G minor 7. We're putting a dominant chord, a 4th below or 5th above, right before the G minor 7 to kind of give it a little bit more weight leading to that G minor 7. Let's hear how that sounds. Amazing. So beautiful already. Play it with me here. So again, you can do this whenever you want. It doesn't have to say D7 necessarily in some kind of lead sheet. You don't have to ask your mom about it. You don't have to get permission. You can just, if the feeling is right, if it works with the melody or whatever the soloist is playing, you can substitute in this D7 for a D minor. Isn't that beautiful? Now notice too, something else. I didn't write out here D7 flat 9 flat 13, even though that's what's going on. Every single one of these voicings that I'm using today is based off of a 1, 3, 5, 7 structure. So I am not going to base any of our harmony today off of any particular scale. Look at me. Say it with me. We are not going to base our harmony today off of any particular scales. I mean it. Instead, what we're going to do is base it off a very simple structure. 1, 3, 5, 7. All the chords we're building today are based off of 1, 3, 5, 7. And we do an exercise called hinging. Here we have our C7 chord, right? Here's our 1, 3, 5, 7, a little inversion there. We can hinge from various points of the chord, at least from the root, the 5th, and the 3rd. From the root, we hinge up any of these 9s, right? The natural 9, the flat 9, the sharp 9. All of it is fair game. There's no rule to this. It's kind of whatever sounds good. This works on so many levels. A, because we're not going to use scales to build our harmony today. We're going to use 1, 3, 5, 7, and we're going to hinge off of the 1, 3, 5, 7. This is really cool because it means we don't add anything to the chord. It's not like we play our 1, 3, 5, 7, and then we add upper structures. No, The 1, 3, 5, 7 is always represented. If we're playing a 9, that's the 1, that's the root, that's hinged up. It gives it some place to go, right? It gives it this balance and this force with the 4-part harmony. You can do the same thing off of the 5th. The 5th traditionally can hinge down to that flat 5. You could hinge up to the 13, that A, which is also the 6, the flat 13, right? All of these are fair game. And because we're not basing it off of any scale, we can use multiple hinge notes to create tension, some counter melodies. We keep the harmony moving, and it's not based off of the whole half diminished or the altered scale or anything like that, right? It's based off of where the voice wants to lead. It's so freeing and it's so simple when we get into it. For dominant chords, we can also hinge from the 3rd, right? So we have our 1, 3, 5, 7. That 3rd can hinge up to the 4th, and that's really a suspended 3rd, right? Hear this all the time. So you're going to be seeing a lot of these hinge voicings in all of the exercise we're doing today. Isn't that great? No more scales for the harmony, at least for this exercise. We just want to keep it to 1, 3, 5, 7 and move those 1, 3, 5, 7s around in fun ways, right? Keep the voicing soprano, alto, tenor, and baritone and have fun moving those voices. Okay, let's get back to our substitutions. Our 3rd version of our 3-6-2-5 is with the tritone sub. So this is, instead of a D7, right, which was our last substitution, the secondary dominant, a tritone away from D is A flat. And we can use that A flat 7 chord to get to our G minor 7. An easy way to remember this is tritone subs are always just a half step above their target. So G minor 7 is our target, half step above is A flat 7. When you're approaching any diatonic 7th chord, you can approach it from a half step above with a dominant chord, and it's always going to sound good. And speaking of our 1, 3, 5, 7 voicings, again, the bass doesn't really count. It's kind of detached from the situation. Notice that 1, 3, 5, 7 is totally represented here on our A flat 7 on the top 4 notes, right? The 1 is hinged up to the 9. The 3 is here. The 7 is here. And that 5 starts hinged up to the 13. And then again, because we're thinking hinge notes, it can move down. So now we have this beautiful, gorgeous progression here. Let's play it. 2, 3, and. So pretty. Again, we're substituting out that 6 chord for a tritone sub. Again, I'm keeping the Roman numeral the same. I'm doing all kinds of crazy stuff in the 2-5, just for my own amusement. Hopefully for yours too. Beautiful, right? This is the tritone sub. Again, just a half step above our target of G minor, we can put an A flat dominant chord, really any voicing you want, and it's going to sound pretty good. Next up is something that is super slick and super easy. We talked about the tritone sub, how it was just a half step above the 2 chord, right? A half step above the G minor 7, our target chord. This is also just a half step above, and it's even simpler because it's not even a different kind of chord. It's the parallel minor from a half step above. So literally, whatever 2 chord we're approaching, if it's a minor 7 chord, we can approach it from a minor 7 chord, and it sounds amazing. Check this out. How great is that? Play it with me. 2, 3, and. Just hinging there on the 3 chord, if you haven't noticed. How beautiful is that? So this A flat minor 7, right? And it says Roman numeral 6, but that's because you have the license to do this. Whenever you're going from a 6 to a 2, as long as it fits with what's going on, even if it's a bit of a risk, this could change the texture of the band. On this A minor 7 here, I'm just hinging off the 5th of A minor 7. Ooh, a little Phrygian thing. Hey, if you like this kind of nerdy harmonic stuff, go ahead and click that like button. If this is your first time on our channel, please hit the subscribe. It really helps. Now for my favorite substitution. This is the flat 3 diminished. This is actually the tonic diminished, but we'll call it the flat 3 to avoid confusion. I have a video in the works all about the tonic diminished. It's the most beautiful chord in the entire world. But for our purposes today, we'll call it the flat 3 diminished because that's literally what it is. Again, I still have the 6 Roman numeral up because I want you to know that whenever you see a 3-6-2-5 or you want to play a 3-6-2-5, this is an option as a substitution for the 6th chord, for the D minor 7. So let's hear this flat 3 diminished. All of that hinging, creating that beautiful inner voice movement there. Just so gorgeous, so much fun. Three, flat 3 diminished. This is an under talked about chord, the flat 3 diminished. In fact, Barry Harris himself said, "Why doesn't anybody talk about the flat 3 diminished anymore?" I agree with that sentiment. It was everywhere for a while. It's so beautiful. Play that. Woof. That is by far one of the more enjoyable things you can do on the piano is that flat 3 diminished 2-5. All right, next up is a substitution for our Steely Dan fans in the house. This is a pretty modern sounding substitution, modern in many quotes, of course, because that means 50 or 60 years, but this beautiful chord. So now we are ditching the A flat as the root movement, right? So we're going to approach our 2 chord. By the way, all of these, if you haven't noticed, are just ways to approach that 2, right? We're just trying to get to the 2 chord. So here we go, our 3, and then it's a cousin here, a closely related cousin to our secondary dominant of D7. This is our move voicing, which is a D add 2 triad over F sharp, over the 3rd of D major, right? And this brings us this beautiful half step movement to our G. For our G, I'm going to do a secondary dominant on the G. I'm substituting out the 2 because it sounds so good from here. Isn't that beautiful? Again, tons of hinging going on the 1, 3, 5, 7 of any of these chords. The bass is detached. The mu chord is kind of its own thing. Let's play it just for the sheer beauty of this substitution. You can use this, by the way. 2, 3, and... This last C7 is actually an F tonic diminished. Again, tonic diminished video coming soon. So exciting. With that mu chord there. Again, that movement from, right, this D add 2. Very specific, right? You have, it's actually 4 notes. The bass is attached to this one, by the way. D, E, F sharp, and A. In an inversion down here, right? It's going to double that A on top, double that D up there to grab it, get a little movement. Let's play it a couple more times. 3, and... Whew. One more time. Let's resolve it to F at the end here. Come on. Good gravy. That's so good. That's so good. That was from the root of F sharp going to G, and we have one more. Our last one is that as well. But I don't know if you noticed, but there have been 3 different roots that will get us to the G. And there are more actually, but these are just kind of the most basic. So we had our diatonic D minor 7, right? We had our D7, which is the secondary dominant, going to G minor 7. And then we had 3 chords, substitutions going from A flat to G minor. We had our A flat 7, tritone sub. We had our parallel minor from above, A flat minor 7, just scooting it down. And then we had our absolutely stunningly beautiful A flat diminished, right? The flat 3 diminished going down to our G minor 7. So we have one more, and it's another one that comes up from F sharp. So we had our mu chord from F sharp up to G minor 7. It's like that, but it's a little bit different. It's the parallel minor from below. This is so beautiful. Listen to this. 3 and... How pretty is that? Now, if you're playing with a bass player or a singer, they might have to have really big ears if you just throw this out at them. But if you're doing like a solo piano thing or even a trio thing, good griefin' beautiful, you know what I mean? I almost cursed. Sorry, Mom. Let's resolve. That's all it is. 7 ways to substitute. Let's review. Diatonic is just the regular way. Then you have the secondary dominant, where you take that diatonic chord, you make it a dominant chord. The tritone sub, which is the tritone dominant of that secondary dominant. The parallel minor, which is just a half step above your target. If your target is a minor chord, you can always approach it from a half step above. The flat 3 diminished, very specific to the 6 chord substitution, the flat 3 diminished. Sounds great going to the 2. The mu chord and the parallel minor from below. That will do it for me. Until next time, happy practicing.